Hello, my name is Don Schnitzler. I'm a member of the Forest History Association of Wisconsin. And tonight I'm also going to be your presenter. On behalf of the association, I'd like to welcome you all to this April 2024 webinar presentation. To help make the presentation go more smoothly for everyone, we're going to ask that you pose any questions you might have during the talk using the chat feature. It's probably located at the bottom of the screen. I've already enabled it, and I'm hoping that it works. If for some reason it doesn't work, just go ahead and use the Q&A feature, which is also located at the bottom of the screen, and I will watch both at the end of the talk so I can answer your questions. Finally, at the end of this presentation tonight, there's going to be a brief survey, 7 questions that will come out asking for your feedback about the presentation, this evening's presentation. And this evening's presentation is entitled In Terms of Logging. And specifically, we're going to be looking at some of the educational resources collected and preserved by the Forest History Association of Wisconsin and its members. Forest History Association of Wisconsin is going to be 50 years old next year. And over that time, we've had a very active membership that did a lot as far as collecting and preserving historical records for the logging era, for all the logging eras in Wisconsin. And we'll talk about some of those things that we can make available to others to use to help with educating people and students in the state of Wisconsin. All right. Right off the bat, excuse me, there we go. All right, so when it comes to the Forest History Association of Wisconsin, we have as a mission to discover, interpret, and preserve those records of the forest history legacy in the state of Wisconsin. And we talk about our mission being fourfold, that we want to inform the public about forest history of Wisconsin, the importance of the forest to the Wisconsin history. We want to educate the citizens of the state, again, about the importance of forest products in the state history. And then we also want to archive and publish. Tonight, we're really going to focus just on the inform, because one of the things that the Forest History Association does is it provides materials for people that are holding community events or public spaces, and we want to talk a little bit about those. So when it comes to the forest history, the first mission with the informing, we created in 2008 and 2009, first off, 8 panels, and then a couple of years later, we added a 9th panel that are kind of coined a traveling exhibit. The 9 panels are titled Historical Logging in Wisconsin, In Terms of Logging, in the Forest, at the Camps, in the Mills, on the Waterways, as Wood Floats, From Cutover to Sustained Forestry, and then Wisconsin's World War II wartime wood products. Now, the design of these banners that are used for as a traveling exhibit was actually done by the Forest History Association, and we received funding to help support the cost of that through the Hamilton Roddice Foundation. And as a society or as an organization, we use them a lot for ourselves as far as when we go to different events where we want to draw attention to our table. In the upper left-hand photograph, there is our current president, John Grossman, set up, I think he was in Tomahawk at Trees for Tomorrow. Now, I won't swear where he's at, but he was set up at a display and answering questions for people about the history of Wisconsin's forest industries. Down below, the picture right below the top one is Great Lake Timbers Producers in 2021. You can see 4 of our members sitting there. And again, it's the same thing. The banners kind of draw attention and bring people in to discuss things and talk. at the top picture on the right, we have a cultural fair that was actually held here in Marshfield, Wisconsin, where we had the banners displayed. And then on the table, we had a series of products that all of them were made of wood products. And what we asked was that the kids, as they came through, would take a sheet and decide whether those products were a forest product or not. And some of them, like Band-Aids, the adhesive on Band-Aids, the cellulose that was in the Parmesan cheese to separate it, really caused the students to kind of think twice about how our forest products are used. And then in the lower right-hand picture, you see an example of the banner set up at a State Historical Society meeting. This was about 2 years ago in Lake Geneva. There wasn't room to put all the banners where we had our table in the town square or the showroom. So they gave us permission to set them out in the hallway. And then during the breaks, you can see that people would walk up to them and spend time looking at them. And these aren't people that necessarily are interested in forest history, but they're interested in the history of Wisconsin. And so they're great attention grabbers and a great way of informing the public about our state forest history. We also use these panels or make these panels available for others to use. And in the 4 pictures here, we've got on the left-hand side is our two school activities. One was held in De Pere 2018, and the one below that is a picture of one of our former members, Arlie Engel, at Chippewa Falls at the past year. And in both cases, you can see that the students got close to the banners. In the top picture, one of the teachers is pointing out something in a photograph and explaining it to the students. And the other place on the other side there, you can see the students behind her are looking at the photographs themselves and reading the captions. But typically what happens is these banners go out during the course of the years to different schools or different historical events for the benefit of students. 3rd and 4th grade, 3rd grade learns local history, so they're appropriate for communities that were involved with logging. And the 4th grade learns state history, so they're really appropriate for anywhere in the state. We also had the opportunity at one point to be asked to come down and bring the banners down to the state museum, the University of Wisconsin Museum on the State Square. And you can see the banner, the picture up on the right shows one of them in terms of logging. And I don't remember what was on the other side, but again, it was the kind of thing that it's cross-generational. You can see that the kids are interested in it to learn things, and the adults and senior citizens, the same thing on the banner at the top, and then also on the lower right. The lower right is actually set up at the Central Wisconsin State Fair, and you can see that there are people walking around and looking at the banners. I was there at this particular event, and what I remember is one elderly gentleman came up and grabbed a chair and pulled it up, and he read each banner, each caption. He must have been there for a couple hours going through and looking at each of the images and then reading the captions that went with them. So what's important here is I wanted to mention that these are available. So when they were created, again, they were created in 2008. There are 8 different banners, and they're each different more or less. I mean, if you look at them, you can see there's different colors used. The first 2 are completely standalone. You could put up that one banner talking about forest history in the forest, or you could put up a banner where it's just at the camps, and everything about that particular banner deals with logging operations and camp life. The 2 on the right side, on the waterways and as the wood float, kind of complement one another and could be put up together. So you could be using some individually and some together. And then here's a couple other ones: historical logging in Wisconsin, and then in the mills. Now, because we had kind of split these up over the winter so that if somebody needed them, there's some located on the east side of the state and there's some located here in central Wisconsin. I didn't have all the banners to take pictures, so I had to depend on the pictures that were created, the proofs that were created when the banners were created in 2008. So what they contain, though, is a collection of historical photographs, descriptive captions, and they're all on a self-standing retractable stand. The stand sits on the floor. You can pull out the panel just like it's a curtain or a shade in a window, and then attach it to the top, and it will stand there on its own power. And there's different configurations that can be made. You know, if we were to set up this display in one line, it would be 21 feet long. If you set all 8 banners up, they're 3 feet, almost 3 feet each, we'd be talking about 21 feet. You can set them back to back so that you have 4 across and 4 across, and then you have about 10 feet. So you can play with them as far as the space that's available wherever they're going to be displayed. You can also set them in a square pattern so that you have them set up as 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet by 3 feet. Or you could set them up as an octagon, and then it's a bigger space, but people can walk around it continuously. One of the things, though, to keep in mind is the banners are available, and you don't, or if you're interested in having the banners to display, you don't need to have all of them if you don't need or don't have the space in that location to display 21 feet of banner. People have called up and said, I'd like 3 banners, 4 banners. They are available in smaller numbers. You don't have to use all 9 banners for a display. So when you look at the banners, each one contains about 10 photos. The photos generally are about 10 by 14 inches. What I wanted to point out here, these are pictures from 2 of the banners. What I wanted to point out is that the amount of caption varies. You know, so the number of captions or the size of the captions, some of them are very small. If you look at the picture on the brown panel here, the second picture down, across the picture itself, there's a caption there talking about the logging camp. Other ones have a lot of words with it that describe what's going on in the picture. So it's going to vary when you're looking at it. But again, when you look back at those pictures that I showed you of the displays set up in different locations, they always draw people in and have people looking at them. For us, it's nice because we can start conversations. For if they're displayed with the school, the teacher can use them to point out things that they might not have access to in the classroom, or it could be something that was set up at a community event. The past years, for example, it adds to what they already have going on at their event in Chippewa Falls. So the first thing I wanted to mention is that if there's an individual or organization that can think of a place where these might be beneficial to the community, they can contact me at the Forest History Association, and we can see what's available. To be honest, last year they didn't go out very often, and that's one of the reasons we're talking about them tonight, because they're really good resource, and they need to get out in the public where we can meet our mission of informing people about the history of Wisconsin's forest history. So again, you could reach out to me at the email address that's given there, or by my cell phone number, which is also on the bottom of the screen, 715-383-9775. As far as cost, we don't have a fee for using these. We generally try to coordinate it so that we can get them out to the most people. So if someone calls and says, I have an event going on May 15th, and then someone else calls about May 15th also, we might ask if it's okay if we divide them up so that you get 4 and 4, or each party gets 4 and 4. But it depends on what and how many requests we have for the banners at different times. I can tell you that this time of the year in the past, we've had more requests for schools. The schools tend to ask for them in April and May. May is Historic Preservation Month, so they go to the schools then, sometimes early June. Summertime, you have community events going on, and so that's when you're more likely to have a historical society or a community fair or some type of festival asked to use the banners. And then during the winter, for the most part, they don't get used a lot in the winter. And so one of the things that time is really good for organizations like libraries or schools that don't have a specific time when they need them to ask about them and place them in their spaces. Whatever is of interest to people, we'd be glad to help accommodate having the banners or making the banners available to people to use. And they are, like I said, they're attention getters, and they are very interesting banners to read. Let's see. I made the mistake of opening the chat, double check to see it was working. All right. So what I wanted to do tonight was kind of give you an example of some of the things and some of the images that you might see on these banners. And I thought as long as we were doing that, we'd talk a little bit about the terms of logging, the lingo that goes along with logging. And I'm a cytotech. I was never, I worked one summer in a sawmill in between college years. But other than that, what I've learned from reading. And again, members of the Forest History Association have a long record of collecting and preserving records. One of the, well, there's two books that I'd recommend if you're interested in learning about logging terms. One of them is L.G. Sorden's Logging Lumberjack Lingo. And I've got a picture of that later on, or any of the books by Malcolm Rothschild. The pictures here, the pictures that I use tonight are actually from Malcolm Rothschild. Many of the photographs that are on our banners are also pictures that tie back to images that he shared with us. So to start off, when it came to working in the woods back in the earliest days, logging kind of kicks off after the lead mining industry closes down. 1840s, we get our first logging in Wisconsin. It goes to, well, it's still continuing today. Kind of gets divided into three eras. The original logging by the riverways, then the time frame that was logging with the railroad, and then kind of the modern era lumbering industry. And when it came to working in the woods, the basic work unit in the woods was a 4-man crew or a 5-man crew if you were using an oxen team. But this would be a typical 4-man crew of lumbermen or lumberjacks in the wood, responsible for falling trees, cutting the trees into the proper length for dragging them out of the woods, and then the person for taking them out of the woods, the teamster. And so when you look at this picture, the picture is really a pretty good picture because it gives you a chance to see this crew of people and who they are. You can look at the picture and you see one guy with an axe, another guy holding the reins, another person holding the saw, and then it looks like the other person also has an axe. But the skidder would be the person responsible for dragging the log out of the woods after the tree had been fallen and had been cut into the proper length. The swamper is the man who cuts the limbs off the tree after it falls. Probably one of the guys with an axe. He would go in there and trim all the branches off the top up to the point where they were cutting the logs to transfer back to the sawmills. And then the sawyers, there's 2 of them usually that would work with the crosscut saw and cut the tree down. Now, when it comes to, we'll talk about this in a second, I guess. This is an image of a white pine tree. Again, this is one of Malcolm Rothschild's pictures. And a lot of the photographs we see of logging in Wisconsin, you see people with crosscut saws. Now, crosscut saws actually didn't start being incorporated with falling trees until the late 1870s, 1880s, probably universal by 1890s. The first crosscut saw where they had raker teeth in it to pull the sawdust out from the blades was advertised in 1876. So it took two men to cut down a white pine. You can see the white pine in this picture, which is probably about 1900 yet, is a pretty good sized tree, probably a couple 100 feet tall. It was also probably a couple 100 years old. So the two men would cut the tree down, and after the tree was down, then the person known as a swamper would come in and take off all the canopy, the branches up at the top. And then the buckers would come in and cut the fallen tree into logs that were about 12 to 16 feet long. So here's the buckers. And again, what they're doing is after the tree was down, they would cut each tree into the proper lengths for taking it out of the woods. And this picture is one, you see it a lot. It's in Malcolm's books. It's on our banners. It's in the state book, Wisconsin, Our State, that they use for teaching history to the 3rd and 4th graders in the state. And so it's a common picture. Anyway, what happened was once the tree was down, a trimmer would come in and take off all the limbs from there up to the point where they were going to cut to logs. And then that top part usually was just left to dry. And then the bucker, which was what these two guys are, they were the ones who took the trees and cut them into the proper lengths. And again, the proper length would be anywhere from 12 to 16 feet at this time. Now, in the early years of logging, oxen were the typical animals that were used for skidding logs out of the woods. And in this picture, you can see it's just got 3 men, but there's a teamster here. He's holding in his hand a stick, a goad, which is used to direct the oxen as far as which way to turn and what they're supposed to do with this log. And one of the nicknames for an oxen teamster is a bullwhacker. But my great-grandfather was a teamster, and what I remember in the family is them talking about a good teamster never beat their animals. They were very careful with their animals. And despite the size of an oxen would respond very quickly to gentle touching with that stick as far as which direction they should go. And so I think, like my great-grandfather, many of the people who were teamsters, they babied their animals, they took care of their animals, and it didn't need to be a whacking. Now, the other thing I wanted to point out here is when it comes to this particular picture, if you look at the picture behind the teamster, the gentleman with the goad, if you look behind that log, it looks like it's elevated up off the ground. And it also doesn't look like there's a lot of snow in that picture. They like to skid logs out of the woods in the wintertime, so there was snow over the surface so that it would pull out easier. This is either late in the season, or maybe I can't explain why there's not a lot of snow. Maybe it was just a year like we had this year where there wasn't a lot of snow. But they've got this hooked up so that the front end of the log, as it's being skidded out of the woods, wouldn't get caught on things. If you look closer, this is what's called a go devil. And I don't know for sure what the Go Devil or what the device underneath that log looks like because I can't see it, but I can look at it and see that there's a chain going up and around over the top of the log. And what they would do is they would take that chain and wrap it underneath one of these cross pieces, bring it up over the log, and then go underneath the other cross piece up to that metal rod and hook it up so that the log was raised up and off of the ground. And they did the same thing when they went to using horses. There we go. And this is a photograph of skidding a log out of the woods in the wintertime. Again, this is, what we think about a lot with skidding logs is that it was done during the wintertime, lots of snow. On that picture, I can't see for sure if that log is resting on something or not. Besides using a Go Devil or a travois, which is the other word for that, to raise up the log off the ground, sometimes they just use a tongs, a skidding tongs. And what they would do is put that in there on an angle, kind of latch it into the side of the log. And then as the horses or oxen are pulling it out, skidding it out, it's clamping down and biting into the log, so it's got a good hold on it. And by using a skidding tongs, it's allowed to swivel a little bit. And so as the wood is, or the log is coming out of the woods, if it does bump into something that would obstruct it, it gives it a chance to kind of wiggle and still move. It's not so locked in a position that it would grab onto something and stay put there. If it would do something like that, though, the teamster could just let the slack out, open up the tongs again and reposition it and then start out again. Now with this particular image, they probably have an evener on the back. That connected to that is a place where they can hook the chain, and that kind of levels out the work the horses are doing so that they're both pulling and not one is pulling more than the other. This is one of my favorite pictures. When after the logs are fallen, or after the trees are fallen and the logs are pulled out from the woods, they go to a landing site. And this is a picture from the Upham Manufacturing Company. I'm saying it's the mid 1880s. I don't have a date on it. The Historical Society doesn't have a date on it. But when you look at it, those are all probably white pine. And a couple things make me put it at the 1880s date. And one of them is if you look, some of the first off, the size of the logs. The earliest logs, the bigger logs, were taken earliest. And for central Wisconsin, we couldn't get in to do logging until the railroads came through. So this area was left go. So this would have been mid 1870s to 1880s are some of the bigger trees coming down. And considering the size of the trees or the logs, I'm thinking that it's probably an earlier picture because of that. And then when you look at, I'm not 100% sure. It's hard to look at the ends of these logs, but there are locations when you look at the end of the logs that you can see they were chopped first. And again, they usually, when they chopped, or when they took a fella tree, they would create a notch to kind of give direction to where the tree was supposed to fall. And those trees that were on the butt end, you can see that where that wedge was taken out and where the saw blade went through and cut, and then where it tilted or tipped. So what they did here, though, was after or as they took the logs or skidded the logs out of the woods, they would bring them to a landing site or an area for decking the logs, and then they would wait until they were bringing in sleighs to take them out. Sleighs, again, when you look at this picture, it doesn't look like it's a lot of good ground cover with snow. So it was probably, they could have been decking at the end of the year. I can't explain that. But what they've got here is they've got the logs decked up to load onto sleighs to take out uh, once the sleighs can operate. So this is kind of decking crew piling or stacking the logs, decks of logs or piles of logs. And we'll talk about or show you an example of how they did some of this, because that's a lot of work stacking those logs like that. Terms here, the landing again, there were other names for that. Banking ground, log dump, rollway, yard. Rollway is something that they would have used to describe it if they were banking the logs alongside the river. You know, in early days, they would take the logs and then take them alongside a riverway. Or actually, if the ice was frozen, they would sometimes take the logs right out on the ice, drop them off there and wait for spring when the water was melting and the rivers were open again. They would take them down the river to the sawmills. In the case of Marshfield, central Wisconsin, our logs were decked and then taken by train into Marshfield. Now, when it comes to decking or loading logs, this is loading logs on a cart. The picture on the right shows a load of loading the logs onto a cart. We'll use that first. And if you look, there's a double chain on the log, one connected to the bottom of the cart and another one connected or going over the top of the logs that are already piled there, and a team of oxen ready to pull them away. As the oxen are walked away, the log will roll up the skid poles that are next to or leading onto the logs. When you look at a picture like this, it kind of explains that as that chain shortens, you can see how it would roll up the skid poles and then end up being up by the pile. Now, when it comes to the picture on the left, you can see the same setup. You can see the double chain there on the log that's being rolled up the skid poles. There is out of sight probably a team of horses or oxen that are pulling that log up, and because of the double chain, it would be rolling up the pole. Now, when it comes to rolling those logs up to the pole, up those poles, there's usually two guys standing at the bottom. And I'll use the next picture to show you that. But they make sure that the log is going up straight, because what happens is one end might be thicker than the other. And as it's being pulled up or rolled up the skid poles, it could start going kittywampus, and then it's dangerous. And so they have guys down at the bottom with cant hooks that help make sure it gets up to the top level. And so you can see here in this picture, the guys down at the bottom, which are called bottom loaders, are kind of guiding that up, and you can already see that it's off. And so one of the guys will grab it with a cant hook and make sure that it's going level. So the two guys at the bottom are the bottom loaders. The guy on the top is what's referred to as a top loader. And then the skid poles I already kind of mentioned. They do the same thing when they get to those decking areas, though. And this is an example of what it looks like in a decking log or a log yard, where they're pulling those logs up over the top of first the skid poles, and then they're going to pull it up over the stacks of logs that are already there. And in this case, instead of seeing one chain going down the middle, you actually see two chains, and that's to kind of help keep it level. And behind this picture, you don't see it, there's a device called a jammer, and there's different types of jammers. But what they're doing is they're actually shortening the chain, and as it shortens the chain, they're pulling them up onto the stack of logs. Now, when it comes to the different jammers, that's actually this picture. There's three different types of jammers. The gin pole jammer, it actually had the ability to swing out over the top, or it was kind of stationary, but it had a pulley system on it that would bring logs up and stack them up on the top. The guy who's up on the top is referred to as the top loader. Nickname was the Skybird. Kind of a dangerous spot to be in if you look at that and think about this bundle of logs being suspended over your head or over your feet, trying to be loaded on there. And there's lots of examples when you go through old historical newspapers about people being injured because a hook came loose from the end of a log or a group of logs. So the bottom one is an A-frame, and an A-jammer is one where if you look at it from the front, it looks like a letter A. There's two poles that meet in the middle. Usually there's a crossbar on it to give it that A look. And then there's guy wires and cables that are going to help load the logs onto it. If you look at this picture on the bottom, you can see that there's a really large log coming up the skid poles, and that's actually being pulled up by one of the cables from the jammer. And once it gets to the top loader will make sure it's put in a proper place. And then the swing boom is over on the right. It had the ability to swing out from the gin pole. So it would move a little bit more than the stationary gin pole jammer. So those were the words or the terms of logging I wanted to talk about tonight. I think a person could actually, and there's better people to do it than me, could actually spend several webinars talking about logging terms, some of the jargon they used in the camp, some of it they used related to the food. Food has all sorts of different names. And then things related to the river, transportation and things, lots of different possibilities for more in-depth look at in terms of logging. So for tonight, though, what I wanted to do was just kind of focus on examples of what people might find on those historical banners and some of the pictures or some of the types of pictures you would see. Moving on, I wanted to talk about a couple books, and I mentioned this one already. Lumberjack Lingo was actually written first by, well, it was written by L.G. Sorden. It was written before he became a member, before the Forest History Association of Wisconsin was actually organized back in 1976. And then he updated it later on with Jack Valier so that it was another Forest History member. And so there's actually two books out there. This is what the older one, the cover from the older one. And the newer one was a little bit more expanded. It had more definitions in it. But one of the things this table shows here, this listing shows, is the number of authors that we have connected to the Forest History Association. Everybody does something different. Everyone has a different interest. But each of these individuals have created or helped the association preserve the logging history of the state of Wisconsin. And some of the books are phenomenal. And even like Lumberjack Lingo, it was first published, I think, in 1969. It will never lose its value because it went in and recorded all the words. I won't say all, because when he writes in his foreword, he says that he left the cuss words out. And I'm sure that there were cuss words that were spread around the lumber camps and out in the woods every day. But again, these authors from the Forest History Association provide a wealth of information, and those resources are available in many cases still in your public library. Lumberjack Lingo is available in my library. Randall Rowe's book, A Centennial History of the Ghosts of the Forest, is still at the library. George Corrigan's book, Caulk Boots and Cant Hooks, is still in our library. I know that these books exist, and they're a resource that everyone should kind of think about if they're involved with teaching middle school kids or college kids about the forest history. Now, quickly, I want to talk about a couple things. Now, you already probably know this, but I'm going to run through some of these pictures rather quickly. The first one is our website. The website contains a good amount of educational resources. We have been collecting, preserving, and trying to place them someplace where people can find and use them. So the first thing I wanted to mention is pay attention to our Forest History Association website for upcoming events. You're already at tonight's talk, but next month we have a professor from Cornell University talking about Cornell University in northern Wisconsin's Pinelands. It should be a really good talk. And he's talking about how Cornell University actually acquired 512,000 acres of Wisconsin land and how they used it over the years to build their endowment. Good talk, though, I think. And then I also wanted to mention that coming up in October of this year, we have our fall Forest History Conference. This year it will be at Kashina. The theme is the beginning of change, tribal history, tribal treaties, and the Menominee Forest story. We're going to have 2 pre-conference webinars in September. And off the top of my head, I can't give you the dates right now, but we have, instead of having 1 webinar in September, we'll have 2. And then for the conference itself, the tours will be on October 11th, the Friday, and the presentations will be on October 12th. We're turning it around this year. And what I hope is that if you're interested in joining us, that you will do so. The information will be posted on the website probably the beginning, well, let's say by the beginning of June. And it does promise to be a very good meeting. So I hope you all can join us. Then just real quick here, on the website, as far as educational resources, we have our wood chips. Wood chips is a monthly electronic newsletter that we send out to our members. If you look at the top of the screen for that, you'll see the current year listed, and then the month. You click on the month and it will open up wood chips. And wood chips typically focuses on 3 or 4 stories about Wisconsin's forest products or forest history specifically related to Wisconsin. And then other things kind of fill in. It might be in March, for example. March is Women's History Month. There might have been something in there about women. April is Earth Day, and so there might be some Arbor Day, and so there could be something in there about Earth Day or Arbor Day to fill in. It always kind of depends on what's going on and what's available. So every issue is different. The newsletter, the quarterly newsletter, comes out 4 times a year. And again, up on the upper right-hand corner, you can see the dates. And if you open one of those up, it will bring up the full viewing capable PDF, and you can read them. Generally, they're 12 pages, or excuse me, 16 pages long. And they contain president's message. President tells us what's all going on with the organization. Then there's news, events, or either past events or upcoming events, kind of a synopsis of those, some type of feature article, and then newspapers from the newspaper archives, historical records from the newspapers that we can share. Kind of planning ahead for this talk, we used an article that was in the newspaper when L.G. Sorden started writing his lumberjack lingo book. Then when it comes to the proceedings, proceedings take you back to the Wisconsin Historical Society. We're in the process of digitizing those yet so that they will all be added to our own website. And we've started to post finding aids to the people who are in the Wisconsin Forestry Hall of Fame. And so you can find, there's 5 of them listed there now. There's 2 more being worked on. And so as those are completed, they're added to the website. Then finally, or lastly, down at the bottom of the screen, when you're at the Forest History website, it says connect. You can connect to our YouTube channel. All the webinars are recorded and posted onto our YouTube channel. There's currently 93 videos there. During 2023, we had 32,000 people view those videos. And since the videos were first placed there in 2013, 114,162 views where people have gone in and watched these. So part of our mission is sharing the history of Wisconsin. We're able to do that with these webinar presentations and recordings of our annual meetings also. And then there's also a link down there that will take us to our Facebook page. To be honest, I've been sloughing off. I am not doing a good job as your Facebook administrator. If anybody's interested in taking that over, I'd pass that off. But we try to post articles related or images related to things with Wisconsin forestry and updates as far as when talks are going to be given. And then the last thing, Tom's not here, so I have to put in a plug for membership. When it comes to the Forest History Association, the membership with the Forest History Association helps support programs like these every month. And if you're interested in some of the membership benefits, you can look at our Forest History Association website. It goes through and talks about all of the different benefits of membership, and it gives you the opportunity to join online. And if you enjoy these webinars and you're not a member, I'd hope you would at least consider joining as an individual member. And then lastly, on the bottom is if you want to contact us for any reason, you can contact the Forest History Association by writing to the post office box at Bangor, Wisconsin. That will go to our treasurer. Or you can send an email to the Forest History Association at gmail.com. And that would come to me, and I would be glad to try to, if it's meant for somebody else, forward it on to somebody else or try to respond to your inquiries. And then again, the upcoming events that I'd hope you would think about. Next month's webinar, and it's already on our Forest History website that you can click on it and subscribe, not subscribe, but register to attend. And then the fall conference, we will be putting out the details for that by June 1st. Okay, with that, I'll just ask for questions, and I can see there's a couple there. Okay, the first question, does the Wisconsin woodland owners know about these banners? I've had them, when was that? Probably 8-9 years ago, I took them to a Wisconsin woodland owners event down by Waukesha. And I think Jim Kirkman was down there this past year. So I think the answer is yes, that they are available or they are aware of them. If they would have an interest for showing them other than when someone from the Forest History Association is present, they can reach out to us and we can see what we can do to arrange them to be circulated. Usually what happens when it comes to that, like for example, last year someone had them in Dane County for a fair. We met in Stevens Point, which is, she was on her way to a cabin and I live in Marshfield, so it's 30 miles over there. We met at a gas station and I handed her the panels before the fair. And then when she was done with them, she brought them back. I met her again and we got them to the next group. And so a lot of times it's a matter of just coordinating, picking up and dropping off so that someone can have them on display someplace. So if anybody from the Woodland Owners Association or owners group is interested, by all means have them reach out to us. It would work for all their chapter meetings or if they have a bigger event. And then another one. Hello from Tom in Pleasantville is in George Corrigan's book 1. Have seen pictures of what appear to be train-mounted steam cranes, hoisting machines, loading logs onto flatbed rail cars, then hauling themselves back to the next empty car. A neat trick. Could these cranes be used to create the landing stacks you are describing? I don't think so, because the hoisting machines were actually railroad cars that that they, how do I say this? They were devices that were over the railroad tracks. After they got to a position where they were going to be, they kind of lowered themselves down and raised themselves up so the train cars could go underneath or pass underneath them. Then they were loaded. The next car would go, or that car would go off, and the next car would go in, and they'd do the same thing. So it's actually a hoisting device that was just used on the railroad. The next question, Sam asked a question about whether or not we ran across French terms. And yeah, there are several French terms. Travois, I remember because that one was, we were talking about, but there are other examples. When you put me on the spot with, I won't be able to think about it right now, in the books in the other room. But there are examples, or other examples of French words that were used in the lumberjack lingos. And one of the things to think about with lumberjacks is that was a melding pot of all ethnicities. I mean, there were Swedes, Norwegians, French Canadians, all in the same area. So there's probably logging terms related to each ethnic background. And the other thing about that is that each geographical area in the United States have different twists on some of the same terms. So you might go to Maine and get one set of logging terms, and there you'd have more of a French Canadian influence because they were coming down from Canada into Maine, coming to the United States. And then when you come and go further west, you might have a totally different set of lingo that means the same thing. So it's kind of specific by geographic locations. There are common terms, but there are still some more specific things. All right. Any other questions? Oh, thank you, Ed. There was one that I thought of, because this one, when I had someone glance at this, they said, okay, tell me, can people get to anything or find anything in your online resources? And so if you want to look for, let's say, Knapp and Stout, okay, I'm going to use Ed because Ed is over by the Menominee area. If you want to find out what has been published in our Chips and Sawdust, for example, if you do a Google search and type Knapp Stout and put that in quotation marks, and then put the, the word "and" in there, and then put quotation marks again, and do Chips and Sawdust spelled out. Chips, the word "and", A-N-D, sawdust, in quotation marks, and hit search. What'll end up doing, it will pull up those instances where you can find both the Knapp Stout and Chips and Sawdust in the same location. And so you will get a specific hit just for our Chips and Sawdust. I think there's like 6 responses to something like that. It's not a great number, but it does make searching our website easier if you know what you're looking for. And if you're looking for something in particular and that doesn't work for you, send me an email at the Forest History Association at gmail.com, and I will see what I can do. Okay. I think that's it for tonight. Again, if you get a chance to join us next month, next month's talk looks very good. And our conference coming up should also be well worth the effort of joining us. So thank you for joining us tonight. I look forward to next month, when I hope we have both Tom and I here to make this run smoothly. So good night, everybody.